Welcome to an extra scary Halloween edition of Draft Sickos.
Woo!
I am Maxwell Baumbach, and this is the show where we cover everybody from the biggest names to the deepest sleepers. And I'm joined by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillespie. Stephen, how are you doing today?
I'm feeling spooky, man. It's scary season out here, but I'm feeling good, man. Excited to be back. Had a nice fun week where I didn't have to travel, which was really nice and
Nice,
more
yeah.
laid back. Yeah, so things are good, man. How about you? How's everything going in Maxwell Manor?
Oh, it's going good. Going good. Can't complain too much. Had a nice little weekend here, building up to all the Halloween festivities. Daughter got to put on her pink dino costume for a little trunk or treat
Oh,
action because
sick.
the weather's gonna stink here on
Mm,
actual Halloween. So we're looking at like 31 degrees and rainy for
yeah.
Halloween proper. So had to get a little bit of that in early. She liked it. I mean, she's 2, so this is like her first year kind of being aware of what's going on, but she had a good time. So it was good. It was good. And then she was jumping in leaf piles later. Did some of that classic fall activity. And when she jumped in the leaf piles, she said that she was jumping like Santa Claus, which was a new phrase. I never heard that before. Wasn't aware that Santa Claus was like a real above the rim kind of athlete. But
Yeah.
you learn something new every day. So, before we get into our main topic of discussion, which is going to be the top returners, so we
Mm,
are starting to get to guys that we've kind of seen a little bit in college already, and we're going to see what is ahead for them. We want to talk about No Ceilings Plus. So we
yeah.
launched No Ceilings Plus this week on NoCeilingsNBA.com. And what No Ceilings Plus is going to be a premium tier for our subscribers. So if you like No Ceilings and you've been getting, our free stuff Monday through Friday, you've been listening to our podcast, that's great. None of that's going to change. You're still going to get every single thing you've been getting before. There is not a single thing that is being taken away from you and moved behind a paywall. But No Ceilings Plus has a lot of sick stuff on it. So for example, if you sign up for No Ceilings Plus, you get our free preseason draft guide, where our entire staff worked together, covered over 60 players, 23,000 words. It's only $8 a month. So if you sign up, you're going to get that draft guide right away. We're going to have a private Discord. If you join No Ceilings Plus, we're going to have exclusive content. I have an article coming out on No Ceilings Plus this week. That's a bonus article. By the time this is already up on the podcast feed, people know, so I'll spoil it. More Stones Unturned going up on No
Mm,
Ceilings Plus. We're going to cover NBA players, young NBA players in their career and their development, all sorts of just new exciting projects. I've got a few other things in the works. Personally, I know our whole team is kind of brainstorming different ideas and things that we're going to do for No Ceilings Plus. So if you are interested in getting more NBA draft content, NBA player development content, um, our preseason draft guide, access to the No Ceilings team, or if you just want to support the work that we've done, even if you say, hey, that's all great. I'm good. I like the free content, but I'd like to support you guys and make it a little easier when you guys want to travel and go to events and go to see things in person. If I can support that, make sure the staff can get compensated, things like that. Go right ahead. Sign up. It's no skin off our back. If you don't want to read the extra content, but you just want to give us $8 a month or $80 for the full year, it's even cheaper. So No Ceilings Plus. Steven, anything you want to add on that front?
yeah, it's always weird, man. In these situations because we're excited about everything that we have going on, right? And we're turning what we're doing, and we're having a more forward thinking company mindset, right? And with that, there's certain things that come along with that, right? And it's something that we have deliberated on quite a bit because it is a big step, right? To
Mhm.
go from just being solely free, and we're still, like you mentioned, we're keeping everything that has been free will be free, and it will stay that way, right? But this bonus content, it takes a lot of our time. Maxwell, you and I both have families where we're
Mm-hmm.
married and we have kids.
Yep.
My wife has been incredibly supportive through all of this and has allowed me to drive in the past month like 13 hours just to go and scout players, right? And I don't get compensated for that. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's the support that we get from our No Ceilings community, it circulates back to you guys because you guys are getting content that you're not getting everywhere else. And I don't have to explain that because our fan base is expansive. Everywhere, every time I go somewhere, I meet somebody who's like, "Oh, shit, you're with No Ceilings?" I'm like, yeah. So that's pretty cool, and I take great pride in that. So our fan base is phenomenal. We just want to keep pumping out incredible content, and the more that we do, the more we just want to continue to work harder, put in that work, and just give it all back to you guys. So any
Yeah, and
support
I
that you
think
guys can give us, it's great. You know?
yep, and I think that's like a big thing. Like when we are like we had guys last year, like took off work, paid a bunch of travel money, things like that to go to Hoop Summit. Like we are
Yeah,
not a lot of people see, we're growing in terms of connection and understanding and recognition within the basketball world, but that's us taking a haircut financially. You know what I mean? It's like so
yeah,
that's a big thing. If you guys can kind of get us to a point where we're able to do more of that stuff and not have our wives be upset when we're traveling for basketball and things like that. That's huge for us. Like legitimately, it will make a world of difference for us and the amount of things that we're able to do and just kind of grow our reach and what we're able to offer on the free side. Just by virtue of getting some more kind of money in the coffers and being able to do that sort of thing. So definitely consider supporting. It would mean the world to us. So now that we have that out of the way, let's get to our and by the way, the preseason draft guide is great.
oh,
Really, really
dude,
happy
yeah,
with how that
crushed
came
it.
out. So yep. Yeah, so 64 players, get ready for the year. And like the thing that was really cool was this year, like we kind of adjusted on the fly. Like there were guys that we didn't have in there that were like, you know what, we got to add this guy. This guy's already playing. They're looking really good. Like let's get them in there. Like I know Ignacio stepped up on the international front because there were some big
Yep.
surprises on the international side early. So big credit to Ignacio on that. Huge credit to Nick for editing all of that. Nick has like been doing an insane amount of work and like is taking
Yep.
on even more. So massive credit to Nick Agar Johnson. Really does a lot behind the scenes for us. So yeah, let's get to top returners. So
All right.
out of the gate, let's start off with Riley Kugel. So this was a guy who was a late season breakout player. Kugel had like a nice, freshman year, and then down the stretch averages 17.3 points per game on 49.6, 39.6, 66.7% shooting splits. Kugel at 6'5", 207, got that kind of pro frame and pro body. Stephen, I'm going to let you kind of lead off with Riley Kugel because he's a guy that I've kind of gone back and forth on, kind of curious as to where you're headed into the year with him.
Yeah, I'm always kind of cautious with this type of player, Maxwell, because in studying the draft like all of us do, here at No Ceilings and beyond, I think player archetypes are one of the things that the scouting community is focusing in on a lot over the past few seasons. And I think Riley Kugel is one of these guys to where he's a little bit lower in terms of player archetype, right? He's not like this jumbo creator. He's not like this 6'8" offensive hub, defensive stopper. He's not one of these malleable bigs like a Chet Holmgren or what we're seeing now with Alex Sarr. He's this traditional kind of 6'5", 6'6", heavily, would like to see more consistency, but he's one of these scoring first guards, right? And this would have been a home run hit in the early 2000s, in the, Kobe Bryant era, right? Getting a guy like Riley Kugel. And now you see guys like Trey Mann come out in the league. And it's funny that, Florida ties here,
Yep.
but you're starting to see players like that become less and less in vogue. Even a guy like Jalen Green, who I was really high on when he was with the Ignite, still kind of struggling to adjust to the NBA and live up to that potential that he had coming into the year. So Kugel is the latest and greatest of this player archetype, which is still fighting for existence. And, shout out to Anthony Edwards being one of these other types of, archetypical forebears for Riley Kugel, right? But Kugel has averaged almost 10 points last year, almost 3 boards, 1 assist, almost 1 steal, shot 46% from the floor, 38% from deep, only 66% from the free throw line. Maxwell, I know that that's a big deal for a lot of folks. He was
Mm-hmm.
82nd percentile in catch and shoot, 77th in pick and roll ball handling, 57th in spot ups. He was also third at Florida in scoring, which is actually pretty impressive because of the beginning of the year. He wasn't an offensive focal point, but as the
No.
season progressed, he started taking on more and more responsibility. And the thing with him, the same thing that goes along with this player archetype is that super dynamic offensive creator has the handle, which I think is going to be under discussed in terms of, other things like his scoring is going to be the biggest thing, like the shooting, the scoring, the dynamic approach that he has to his game to shoot and get to the rim. The handle is actually pretty strong, right? There's other things that I'll kind of leave to you for your breakdown of him that I think that it's going to be kind of the thing that chips away at his draft stock a little bit.
Mhm.
But if he can continue Maxwell this year, what he left off with at the end of last season, this is going to be a guy that could shoot up the draft class, right? I have him within my top 10 already right now, but I'm well aware that there could be a false floor underneath him as the season progresses.
Yeah, so I think there's some that I think it's interesting too because with Kugel, he's kind of all over boards, and we were kind of discussing in our group chat like what we're trying to read the tea leaves of like right now. It seems like a couple big mainstream publications have him as like a second round guy. And it seemed like at the end of last year, people were talking about him like he could have gone lotto if he'd entered the draft. So like, where is the disconnect? What's going on? Is there something we don't know? I don't know. Um, I like how Kugel scores a lot from the perimeter, from the outside, and I like that he gets to the rim at the very least. So as far as the shot goes, I know the free throw percentage is going to be scary to some people. I'm kind of buying it. I like how he's taking him from NBA range. The
Yeah.
volume went up quite a bit toward the end of the year. I do think he can shoot it. Um, I like the mid-range stuff too. And like he's a really good pull-up shooter. Like he didn't take a ton, but he was like 32% on pull-up threes, which for a young player is really good. Like 54% on mid-range pull-ups, which is fantastic. And then the other thing that I thought was really impressive with him is that even though the rim finishing was like not good, like I think I'm pulling up his numbers right now. He was like under 50% at the rim in the half court. But what he did well is that 37% of his shots in the half court came at the rim, which is a really important indicator. Like just being able to pressure and get to the rim matters quite a bit. And it's because you said that it's that handle. It's that big time Tyrese Maxey kind of catch and go speed, but being 6'5" and 207, that's a nice body to have that kind of quickness with. Got a good first step.
Kind of lost your audio there, Maxwell. Yeah, still gone. Don't know what the issues is here, ladies and gentlemen. Having a little bit of technical difficulties here for Maxwell.
Is this any better?
Yeah. Yep, you're back. We got you back. Oh, and now you're gone.
What on earth?
Wait, nope, we got you back. Yep,
Okay.
you're there. You're
Very
there.
strange. Very strange. So with Kugel, I do think there's real 3-level upside. I think he's got to work on his touch and angles and things like that at the basket. And I think the other big step for him is like Chuck used this phrase, like a not quite wing. Chuck at Chucking Darts on Twitter, friend of the program.
Yeah.
Where it's like with Kugel, like he's 6'5", so he's not like short. He's got some burliness to him, but at that size, I feel like you really need that playmaking punch. And this was a guy that just didn't really have that last year, even during that big stretch. Over the year, averaged 1 assist to 1.5 turnovers. Has these moments as a passer where there's real creativity flashes and there's some functionality to it at the same time. But given his height and game, if he's not a bit more of a positive playmaker, I do think it puts a bit more of a ceiling on him. Because then we're kind of just looking at a score. And I have some real concerns defensively too. This is something that I know Evan has brought up among our crew before. He is often way too flat-footed and can quit way too easily on plays, and he doesn't really work too hard to contain the ball. I think he can be too narrow and like won't even attempt to slide or stay in front at times. I think that the defense, if he can just be like okay, and then if he can just like make plays for others more often, I'd be really interested. Right now, I'm pretty interested. I think he's a first round guy, but not like super high on my board.
Yeah, and again, I get the kind of polarization that he has to his game, and I would like to think with Alex Fudge no longer being with the team, right? Colin Castleton no longer being with
Mhm.
the team, he would take on this leadership approach, right? And he would step up his defensive game. He's got other guys now on the team with Florida, adding some pretty good transfers that both of us
Yeah.
like pretty decently, Maxwell. Hopefully now with the additional help that he has on the scoring front with this team, that he'd be able to step up a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball. He's got the athleticism, he's got the tools. I'm not necessarily a tools over technique guy, but sometimes Maxwell, when we get these guys with the athleticism, with the explosiveness to his game, uh, they can kind of coaching can kind of take a hold of their playing style and their philosophy a little bit, and then they'll improve on that front. We'll see. Like I said, I the back end of my top 10 is very fluid, and I have him in about like that 6 through 8 frame right now. And I could easily see him sliding down, but the scoring punch that he gives to a team, I think is still very valuable. I think that we still see NBA teams value instant offensive minded players. And I
Mhm.
think that he does have that to his game. I mean, even now
Yeah.
with, yeah,
I think I was to say I think that's maybe where I am being like a little unfair to him is that he is going to bring that right away. And then the things that we talked about, like what tends to improve in guys in their second year, it's the game slowing down for him. It's the
yep.
playmaking. It's the kind of little things that I'm complaining about. So maybe I should kind of hedge my bets a little bit more and bump them up a little bit. Because yeah, I need to
I
like
mean,
actually put on my big boy pants and like finalize a real board this week. And he's a guy that I've had really high, like I've had in the top 10 at points, and other times I get a little bit down on the archetype, and yeah, I'm a little confused as to where the playmaking is going to settle really.
if I can kind of look into the future a little bit. I know this is more of Rowan's, it,
Yeah.
his little area of expertise. If I can gaze into my crystal ball a little bit here, uh, I think that this class is going to be probably one where the archetype, not the player, is going to be assessed the most. And I'm already kind of starting to see it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
where people are looking back on social media saying that they've missed on these players, that they've hit on these players. And because they missed on those guys, there might be the tendency to kind of overcorrect with the players that we have in the immediacy. So I'm kind of curious to see how that works out throughout the year, Maxwell. That's going to be one of the subplots, one of the storylines of the
Mm-hmm.
this draft class that I'm going to look at a lot is, are people buying the player or are they buying the archetype, or are they selling on the player and the archetype? And I think Google
Yeah.
is going to be one of the forefront, prospects within that subplot that gets kind of dissected because of his player type.
That's a really interesting point. And I think that is something to monitor too, because I think on one hand, like archetype is really important. Like you don't want to draft a guy
Yeah.
that is playing a position or playing a role that is like quickly descending in value around the league way too high. You don't want to do that. But at the same time, I think there's a real danger to like getting too cute with it and drafting I'm trying to think, just like drafting a guy based on the idea when
Yeah.
like maybe the production isn't there or doesn't have a path to being there. And we have like a 2018 situation where you have a team like the Bulls seeing like, Chandler Hutchison and
Mm,
being, oh, he's like big, he's long, he can like do a lot of things, like he's malleable, like this is what we want. And then you draft Chandler Hutchison over a guy like Jalen Brunson, where it's just like, oh man, in hindsight, you should just taken the guy that played at a big school and was really good at everything. Like and even if he is small, like maybe that's what you should have done. So that's going to be an interesting thing to monitor because there are always going to be exceptions to the rule.
yep.
And it's interesting to see if guys can carve that out and truly be that. Let's move on to Donovan Clingan, who I think in some ways is kind of benefiting from that same trend that you're talking about of,
Yeah.
oh, well, I missed on this archetype where we've seen Walker Kessler, who is a guy that everyone was like, oh, he's a big who's not going to be super versatile defensively, sell. And I was guilty of that. And then even Mark Williams, like was the guy that a lot of people in that same class were low on. I was a lot higher on Mark Williams just because I loved the athletic tools. I had like a lottery grade on him still.
Yeah.
Um, those two guys were people that people were really low on. And then you see Derek Lively this year already coming in and making an impact. Um, Guys that
starting.
are really big. Yeah, and Lively's different because he is really athletic, where I think Mark Williams, people really undersold how athletic he was. Like, there were people that were like,
Yep.
"Oh, he's gonna get cooked in space at the NBA level." It's like, that's
And he was a
wrong.
returner, so there's you gotta knock him down a peg because you can't
Yeah,
have a
yeah, yeah,
returner
yeah.
over a freshman. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think with Walker Kessler, it's like really the one that we're looking at. Where like I think people were way too low on the idea of like just a really large man that isn't able to switch. Klingon is benefiting from that to some degree, but part of it is also just like, hey, maybe we're correcting and not overcorrecting. Maybe this just is a really valuable player. Klingon is going to be back at UConn. He's 7'2", 265 pounds, just a big, enormous guy who got into way better shape. I've mentioned this before, but going into last season, I was doing like an RSCI 100 watch through, and when I got to Klingon, I was just kind of like, I don't see it. Like this guy's
Mm,
big. He's really slow. He's not in good shape. Maybe in a couple years, like maybe this is a guy that will take a red shirt. Maybe a couple seasons he'll play himself into shape, and then we'll come back to it. And he got into really good shape really quickly at UConn and was immediately the best bench player in the country on a team that won a national title. Offensively, pretty much just a play finisher last year, but extremely effective at it. Very, very efficient. Knows where to roll. After he sets a screen, he will never get bumped up his spot. Like no one is ever gonna like intercept the path of Jonathan Klingon and prevent him from getting where he wants. He's just gonna plow through you. And he's outstanding on the offensive glass. Had an offensive rebound percentage of 19.9 last year, which historically compared to other centers is outrageous. I think I had one other guy ahead of him in my database, like in the last 7 years, it's done that. I think it was Jared Vanderbilt, who was also kind of just in an energy role. So
yep.
that like blows out of the water what a lot of high level offensive rebounders have done. Big time screener, makes really good contact. On the overseas tours for UConn, he was taking a couple threes and making them. So that could be an
Yep.
interesting thing to keep an eye on. If that comes along, the value I think really goes through the roof. He didn't pass much last year, but I thought he had some moments as a passer. I really don't know where he's at with the ball though, because at times, like if he has to put it on the floor, he can look a little clunky. I don't know that he has anything from a face-up standpoint. I'd like to see him develop his angles as a screener. Like I tweeted about Yusuf Nurkic the other day, and Nurkic is so good about knowing his own personnel and knowing, Devin Booker wants to get downhill, so I'm going to set this screen behind the player. Or Durant wants to get out to the perimeter, so I'm going to set it above the player. With Klingon, a lot of times he's just like setting a very like basic YMCA. I'm going right next to the man and screening, which for a guy like Andre Jackson, it's like that doesn't really help him a ton. Like help get behind that guy and help Andre Jackson get downhill. For Jordan Hawkins, make sure you're setting it over the top, giving him space, from the 3-point line. That's something I'd like to see from him. Really good rim protector defensively and a big time shot blocker. Block rate over 14. Knows angles, like he knows what he's doing. But if you drive into him, he's also just going to swallow you up. And he's not a total dud athletically. I think a lot of
No.
times if a guy is just really tall, people assume they stink athletically, and that's not the case with Klingon. He moves pretty well. And the feel shows up in his steal rate also. Very good steal rate for a big man. I think the big questions are just, can he add more offensively? Is he going to have some ball skills? Is he going to have some passing to him? Is he going to just be more than a play finisher? Or can he finish plays in a wider variety of ways? And then the other question is, how severe is this injury going to be? He's missing some time with a foot injury.
Yep.
Is that something that's going to be a real lingering problem, or is this going to be something where he's back in a month and we never hear about it again? So I really like Klingon. Klingon's like a firm top 10 for me. I think I've got him around 6 or 7 right now. But people like Rafael Barlow, I believe, has him around like 3. Like there are people that like
Yeah.
really see that upside, and I think there's a real path to that. Where are you at with Klingon?
Yeah, I was looking at Raphael, and again, going back to this like archetype debate that's going on. I think that one of the things that is kind of like reinforced where he is with Klingon are those guys like a Walker Kessler and Mark Williams having big games early on in the season. So I like him a lot, man. Just hearing about the body transformation, I don't know why. This is probably just like the weirdo wrestling fan in me, but it reminds
Mhm.
me of Gunther in
Yeah,
WWE, right?
yeah,
Like, what
yeah.
do you think of that comp? Is it pretty good?
I love it. I love it. Just pure brutality from both of those men.
Yes.
Like you're just gonna get overpowered.
Best back chops in the business from Donovan
Mm-hmm.
Clingan in college basketball. Um, like you were saying, man, like there's strong belief that he could have been like a really high draft pick last season if he would have stayed in. And I think that it kind of makes you wonder how high he could go in this class if he was kind of almost promised and guaranteed a really high spot. Um, it was also well documented that he played only 13 minutes per game, playing behind Sonogo. Now with more minutes, this is exactly what scouts kind of wanted to see, and this was the hypothetical with him last season when there was the, hey, just go ahead and declare now. Let's pre-draft this big man guy. He shot over 65% from the floor, averaged just under 2 blocks per game in those 13 minutes, which was a ridiculous over 14% block rate. Uh, his synergy numbers are just through the roof, man. Although he's big on paper, he moves very well on the floor, which I think speaks to that athleticism component to his game that you were talking about earlier. Keeps the ball very high on entry passes, which is kind of a pet peeve of mine when a big man will catch the ball in the paint and then he dips it down and then a
Yep.
guard pokes it out. Like, what are you doing? Just be big. Keep the ball big too, right? A strong screener, can finish through contact. Nice second leap, which again speaks to the athleticism
Mhm.
that you were just talking about. And on top of the strength, combined with the athleticism, he has really soft hands, man, and
Yes.
can finish with either one of them, which is another big part of being an NBA big, is being kind of ambidextrous with the ball in your hands. The jumper looks promising for his player type, despite the 51% free throw percentage that he had last season. I expect those things to climb. Defensively, he covers a ton of ground. Ball tracking skills are impeccable, recovers to contest the second shot just as well as the first. And his hit ahead potential on the boards, like we could be looking at a Kevin Love esque kind of,
Ooh, I like that.
full court, let it sail, hit my guy. That way I can just stay back here and play defensive again and just kind of keep that ring around the rosy going on a little bit there. So I like him a lot, dude. I think that I'm going to have him in my top 10. 3 is kind of crazy, like, in my opinion, because there's still a lot to be said about some of the other prospects within this class. However, it would not be crazy if you're looking at him probably like 5 or 6. Like, I think that
Yeah.
that is kind of maybe even 4. Like, saying 3 is
Mhm.
crazy might sound like really strong for me, but
Yeah.
4 and 5 and 6, I think, are well within the realm of possibility. And then again, you could probably even talk me into 3 depending on the team and their needs. So maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of
I
myself, but
think yeah.
he's that highly regarded among his peers within this draft class.
I think 3 would require, like, me feeling really good about him as a short roll passer or a three-point shooter. Like, I feel like I would need one of those to bite that high, and I'd probably
Yeah.
also need some of these other guys that I like a lot right now to maybe not be what I think they're gonna be. Like, I would kinda
Yeah.
need, like, Justin Edwards not what I think he's gonna be. I'd need Ron Holland to not have a great shooting year. I need Jacoby Walter to lay an egg. Like, I need a couple other guys to
Alex
kinda
Sarr would kinda have to stop doing what he has been doing so far
yeah,
this
yeah,
year.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But we'll see. I'm not completely close to the idea. I think would just require, yeah, a pretty significant leap in one of those areas. Let's do Kyle Filipowski next because he's a
Yeah.
guy that I, just to be completely honest, struggle with quite a bit. He was really
Mm.
productive at Duke last season, but he wasn't efficient. It's like he's one of those guys where, like, if you just look at the box score, it's like, oh man, like 18 and 9, like those kind of games pretty consistently.
Yep.
Um, but he's had some games where things didn't look great. 6'11", 220. Had like a hip surgery of some sort over the
Yeah.
offseason, which, like, generally is like a uh-oh, like what's going on there? And then
Pretty
everyone is like,
scary. Yeah.
oh, he looks awesome now. Like, everyone that has seen him post surgery is like, he looks fantastic. So, like, maybe it was
That
just
was the
like what he
intent of
needed.
the surgery too,
I
right?
think
Like,
so.
it
I don't
was it
know.
was surgery to improve, I think, like, the hip flexibility, if I'm not mistaken,
Which,
right?
like,
So
I'd never heard of this before. Like, I don't know
never.
if this was, like, because of some medical injury that he had or something like that. The first thing, let's get to, I'm gonna pop this up, from Dirty Dancer in the chat. I don't know if I believe in Filipowski's
Yeah.
shot. I think that's a real kind of fair concern, because last year the three-point percentage wasn't great. So at 6'11", 220, Filipowski is sort of billed as this stretch 5, maybe stretch 4.
Kind of.
I lean toward him more as
You
what I'll
know who he
call,
reminds me of? If I can go ahead and just put out a comp now.
I wonder if we're gonna have the same one.
Same time. Ready?
All right,
One,
1, 2,
2,
3.
3.
Zach Collins.
Julius Randle.
Okay.
No?
Whoa. All
Okay.
right. Different. All right. So He was 28.2% from three on 7.2 per 100 possessions. So solid volume. Guys do tend to make their shooting leaps as sophomores, which I wrote about in a piece about Kobe Brown this past year. He was 34.6% in EYBL, and I think the shot looks the same every single time. So I do think he's going to shoot it. I think we'll see him close to 35 would be my guess this year on a similar volume. I also like how he attacks a closeout for a big guy, like a big man closeout. Like if a fellow big or center that's even like a solid athlete charges at him pretty hard, he'll drive at him in a straight line and beat him. And he sees the floor well on the go too. He'll occasionally bully a smaller guy on set inside. It's not a big part of his game. I like him as a screener too. Like that same thing I talked about with Klingon. Filipowski actualizes that a little bit. Really good with the flip screens. Just like what he does from that respect. Work rate is really high. Gets involved on the offensive glass a lot. Making little plays. Moves without the ball. I need him to be stronger with the ball around the basket. Like he's one of those guys where the offensive rebound numbers look good, and then you watch the games and it's like, oh, you missed like 3 times in a row, and just like kept getting your own offensive rebound because like you didn't hold up well through contact, or he'll get the ball and he'll just like not go that strong, and like people knock the ball loose. Like there's just these little things around the basket. Like 50.5% on twos feels low considering how often he was around there and how many opportunities he had. So that's something I want to see change. The defense stuff is weird for me because he was a just not good player around the rim, to be frank. He has to be stronger around the basket. Really kind of slow to react to weak side help. Like if he's the guy who needs to rotate to the rim, I thought he could be a little slow in those situations. And his block rate's just like, it's low. Like if you want him to be a 5, and I know he played alongside Derek Lively, but a lot of times Derek Lively wasn't playing, and he was playing the 5 alongside Ryan Young. So it's not like you can't tell me he was just playing the 4, like when he did have a lot of run at the 5, and that's where his block rate is. So I think he's going to have to be a 4, which then it's just hard to say because like we haven't seen him post whatever this more athletic hip surgery is that he got. I don't hate how he moves in space, and I actually think that his like forward backward movement can be pretty good. He'll like jump passing lanes for steals and things like that if there's a lazy skip. Gets his feet back under him all right. My big concern with him on defense was like if you screen him, it just feels like he's done. Like he has a really hard time with that. And maybe that's another thing where like this extra hip mobility will allow him to kind of swing around those or better navigate him. I'm really confused as far as what I'm doing with this guy. I think as a 4, offensively, it can work. I think with how he can attack a closeout, dribble, pass, I think he can shoot. So I think that's kind of a thing. But I think he has to be like a Zach Collins 4, as I would call it, where it's like, well, he's out there with Wemby. He's out there with Suhans. Like there's enough other guys who can do stuff around the rim that maybe if that element of his game isn't there, he can kind of be insulated a little bit. Whereas Zach Collins in college, of course, was actually a quite a good shot blocker and rim protector, but it's just not really his game now after all these injuries he's had.
Yeah, and that's where I think I come up with the Julius Randle comparison, where both were number 30, so that's a really easy transition. So there's that aspect to it. But just watching them, they're both offensive first, like 4s. I think there's the idea that you could play Randle a little bit at the 5. Maybe if you were, in a different time, you could probably play big lineup 3s, a la Dirk Nowitzki when he first went to the Mavericks when he was a rookie. But I think with Kyle, the name of the game is going to be offense, right? Like he's going to be able to do a lot of different things. Maybe even, shoot the ball at a good clip. I think that's kind of like what we're looking for with him, right? So I like he did score the most points for Duke last year too, which is a big deal considering everybody else that they had on their team. The offense was able to go through there. And Dirty Dancer, I see you in the comments, way better ball handler passer. Absolutely right. I'm just speaking specifically to like score first mentality, offensive minded mentality, what their defensive concerns, like where to plug you, who to kind of fit around you. That's kind of like where I'm going with that comparison there. But back to Kyle, he's pretty quick and shifty. I do like his handle and I do like his vision. I don't think that it's up there with Randall, but I think that he can do some fun stuff with the ball in his hand. He's obviously a good rebounder as well. moves around the court pretty well, but isn't a very big vertical threat, which is kind of what I think that you're speaking to defensively. That's like, in my opinion, what holds him back. He can slide pretty decent, but just the verticality, that pop to his game just isn't there. He's kind of more of an under the basket kind of combo forward in that regard. He has good defensive numbers, but I do have the concerns that you just laid out. Closeout speed isn't great. Switches were an issue also, as well as the screen navigation. Really hustles to stay with his mans on drives and post ups, though, but likes to jump at almost every single shot attempt that is up there. And I think that's because he doesn't have good defensive tools. He's just trying to compensate with his height there. Solid steal rate for a big man, which I do think is a good indication of feel. But my thing was, how big of an issue is the surgery going to be for his game? And then how does that translate? And then how does he look without having a guy like a Derek Lively in that front court with him this year?
Mm-hmm.
Duke's got a lot of guards. I have questions about the front court. Kyle is going to have to do a little bit more of everything now this year in the front court with people who have gone now. So I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And we've got more Duke players coming up on the other side of the break. So stay tuned with us and we'll be right back. All right. So we've got another guy who is someone that I think really had a lot of buzz kind of toward the end of the draft season or college season and could have entered the draft, decided not to. That's Tyrese Proctor, a 6'5" guard, 178 pounds. So on the slight kind of skinny side. He's another one of these guys where I've seen really high on boards. Other places have him quite a bit lower. Where do you have Tyrese Proctor currently, and what do you think of kind of his game and prospects heading into the year?
So coming into the year, I had him as an early second, right? I didn't like a lot of the top 10 buzz that I was getting. And then diving into more film, getting ready for this show, I think that I probably knocked him down too much. I still don't buy like the top 10 noise that he was getting into this season, but I do think that he should be higher. Definitely a first round guy. I would probably venture to say, if I'm kind of remembering who I have where on my board, I could probably see him in that like 18 to 25 range right now, because of the way the second half of the year ended for him. I mean, he was getting to any spot that he wanted to get to. He was able to convert on these little kind of pull up middies, kind of like mid post spin jump shots that looked really, really well. The defense had kind of been there all season and only got stronger as the year went on. I do like the playmaking. I do like the passing. I do worry about the shooting consistency, especially from deep. I do worry about the finishing in traffic at the next level.
Yeah.
And I do worry about how much of a playmaker he actually is. Like he's a solid playmaker. I just don't look at him as like one of these, oh my gosh, did you just see what Tyrese Proctor did? I think he's more of kind of like these score first guys that uses the passing to get him into his shots a little bit, but I don't necessarily look to see him leverage his playmaking as much as I would like. That being said, I think Duke is in a different situation this year. I think with the guards that he has, he could have a little bit more free reign in that regard. But ultimately, I'm just interested, man. Duke is going to be like one of my most watched teams this year because of everybody that they have coming back and coming in as freshmen this year. How do you feel about him?
I'm a little bit higher on him than you, but like not by much. I don't think you're unreasonable. I guess he does have a path to like one of those really high picks. And again, like there are people that have him, near top 5 or even in that range.
Yeah.
I get the idea of it. I'm just pretty low on his physical gifts. So he's 6'5". Like I said, the feel is outstanding. I love how he plays at different speeds. I like how well he reads the big man defender in a pick and roll. I think his handle and footwork and ability to gain separation east-west is really impressive. He has that kind of slitheriness to weave through traffic. He knows what type of pass to throw. His placement on his passes is exceptional. And even with all the advantages he creates, he still limits his mistakes. Like there's a lot to like. And I think a lot of what I wrote about Milo Suzan, who we'll get to, I believe, in part two. Um, I think there's definitely a place for like these kind of guards that have this sort of size and like just the feel is off the charts and they can bring
Yep.
off ball value as a shooter. I just don't know that it's like the most valuable thing in the world. And that's kind of where I'm a little stuck with Proctor is that at 178 pounds, he's really, really thin. It doesn't mean he can't fill out. And he was really good down the stretch last year. So over the last 11 games, or I believe like last 20 games is a longer stretch than that. 11 points per game on 41.1, 37.1, 87.2. His confidence stayed really high. Like he had this really slow start to the year where he was just
Yep.
brutally inefficient and he never stopped shooting, never, changed his game, changed his approach. Was really great on unguarded catch and shoots throughout the entire year, which matters. The teams can't just ignore him. Um, and then defensively, or I'm sorry, one more thing I want to touch on offensively is that he's okay in the mid range, but not great.
Yeah.
And he's not a great pull up 3-point shooter. And then at the rim, he's got some real issues because he is skinny. Like the angles aren't great. He has to settle from further away. He's probably not going to be a guy that um, is like playing through anybody's body at the rim. So like he's gonna have to have like really, really exceptional touch. And he didn't pressure the rim much at all. Only 17.3% of his shots and the half court came at the rim was under 50% on those. So it's like, okay, we were saying that you like Kugel, but he's so much less efficient there. But with Kugel, like twice as many shots at the rim, basically,
Yeah.
is you're on a per possession basis. So I just need to see some sort of real physical development to believe that there's going to be like what is the threat to score with Tyrese Proctor in the NBA? I guess is my concern because if it is just like catch and shoot, then I would rather have somebody that I felt better about from a physicality standpoint.
Yeah.
Um, he needs that pull up to get there. 37.5% of the mid range with the pull up, 17% from three. Like I'm just going under
Hmm.
ball all day against this guy.
Yeah.
And if he's not going to kill you in the mid range, not going to kill you from three, and you don't really have to worry about him much at all at the basket, I think there can be a lot of questions for him. Defensively, you can really stick with guys. The baseline fundamentals are there. I just worry about the size and like he's not a big time defensive playmaker. He had 4 total blocks last season. 2 of them were against Bellarmine. So he's kind of a low block rate guy, which is always a bit of a red flag athletically. I just think he's kind of like a little too below the rim, a little too skinny, and I just can't put a guy like that high on my board. If I'm like, how are you going to score efficiently with the ball in your hands at the NBA level if you're a guard?
Yeah.
So
And
got
what
my
what
sure.
what stands out to me about the jumper, and I agree with everything that you just said about where he's efficient, where he has concerns. It all comes down to the shot, Maxwell. If
Mm-hmm.
you look at the shot, it's kind of very kind of like putty, like kind of off to the
Yeah.
shoulder. It's not like a very technically sound, well traveled jumper to where it looks the same if it's off of movement or off of the dribble or off of the catch. It's kind of similar, but it's kind of away from him. It's kind of off to his strong side, and it's really hard to get into that jumper off of the move, right? Because there's a lot of energy transfer. The ball has to go in a lot of different places at one time. So that
Yeah.
takes longer for the shot to get off, which is quicker for defense to be able to bother it and contest it, right? So the offensive skill set is where I did come in low with him. But kind of like what Dirty Dancer's saying in the comments, he is slippery with the ball.
Mhm.
He can maneuver his way into the lane, but even when he does get to inside the offense, once he gets past his initial defender, he's very floater reliant, right? Which I
Yeah.
think is because of his size. And the floater is nice, so it's good that you have a go-to move, right? But when you're being scouted heavily at the next level, like you're doing well at the second half of a year in the ACC, which is great. What does that look like in the NBA? Where again, Maxwell, this is people are gonna hate me. They're gonna run me off. They're gonna run me out of town about the guards, like the lead guards within a draft class, and that's how high the threshold is, man. Like Look at what Scoot Henderson is going through. Look at the adjustment
Yeah.
that he is having to go through right now in the NBA. And he is like the standard, the hallmark of what you kind of have to do athletically to be taken very high in a draft. I don't know that Proctor is there. And even if he is like, and even if he does get drafted high, look at how much he's gonna have to grow accustomed to, right? Like, that
Mhm.
is a very high threshold to clear, and I just don't know if he's gonna hold up physically. Feel-wise, I think that there is a
Yeah.
lot to like about him,
Yeah, yeah, very, very
a
high feel.
and and I think that that is what makes him valuable, and I think that there are some defensive tools to his game too, where he could be a 2 defensive, you know, like, positional defender, which has value in of itself as well, so I'm just gonna need to see, hopefully, that the shot mechanics are cleaned up, that the load time is brought down, and that it's just not as much all over the place, which is gonna help his offensive game get better.
Yeah. So I think my concern ultimately would be that and he was, like, young for the class, like, he didn't
Yeah.
turn 19 until late in the year and things like that. I would say that just, like, looking from, like, what is his role gonna be at the NBA level perspective, like, someone like Trey Alexander is also
Mhm.
young for his class, like, only a year older. I just think that with, like, Trey, it's like, well, there's, like, a level of physicality, we know that he's got the giant wingspan, and while he's not as quick as Proctor, he's not as slithery as Proctor. He's proven to be just like a nuclear off ball shooter, really great in the mid range, more efficient at the rim, a little more able to get to the rim, and then like just more of a playmaker on the defensive end. Like, is that just more valuable?
Yeah, you
Like I
trust his
I think that's like the conversation that in like where I'm kind of stuck with Proctor is like I see people have him really high, and it's like I'm not even sure that he's higher than a guy that like a lot of people are seeing as like a late first, early second kind of guy.
and the thing with Trey, and we're gonna talk about him actually later on in the
Yeah.
show, is that he's got a ready-made complementary skill set that you
Yes.
trust and that
Yep.
you've seen be utilized to a high degree at the
Mhm.
level that he's at right now, and is likely to continue to do at the next level. Whereas Trey, or I'm sorry, like what we're talking about now with Proctor, is that it's all kind of hypothetical because he is more of an on-ball creator, and
Mhm.
I'm not sure that you're looking to like. There's nothing about what I saw last year, Maxwell, that is saying I gotta have this guy in my program. I gotta have him running my
Mhm.
offense, and
Yeah.
that's scary because of his what his player type is.
Mhm. So let's do Mark Mitchell up next. I'm gonna go quick on him. I wrote a feature on
Yeah,
Mark Mitchell. You can go to NoCeilingsNBA.com and read that if you want my full Mark Mitchell thoughts. 6'8", 205 pounds. I believe now he's listed like 235.
sheesh.
Sophomore at Duke. I like him a lot. I just think from a physicality standpoint, he's ready for the NBA. And I think that when you are that big and that athletic and can defend like that and have feel, you're gonna at least hang around the NBA if nothing else. Really good attacker, really good feel as a passer, even though the assist rate wasn't really high. Will do all the dirty work and kind of fill the gaps on offense. Defensively, very in tune off the ball. Guards multiple positions. Good instincts as a weak side rim protector. Gets into handles off the ball. Will jump passing lanes. Everything you want in a defender, I think, is there with Mark Mitchell. I don't think he's going to be like an all defense guy, but I think he's going to be a plus defender at the NBA level. Um, Oh, and real quick on the passing front, watch their game against Syracuse if you just want to like buy
Okay.
the passing. Like he just ate them up. And I know not a lot of NBA teams are going to play, a 2-3 zone, but it just showed like that guy knows where everyone is on the court all the time and knows how to PC up. It was the one game that kind of let him operate as a passer and played through him a little bit more. And he was exceptional. It's going to come down to the shot. Like very, very low volume from three, but hit 35%. Shot looks funky. But again, a good free throw shooter. I think how you feel about Mark Mitchell comes down to like, do you think he can be a league average 3-point shooter? Because if he does, he's like a playoff rotation guy. But if you don't think that, or if you have concerns about it, you're probably a lot lower on him. So, what are your thoughts on Mark Mitchell?
I have him in my second round right now,
Okay.
but the door's not shut on him to rise. Uh, Speaking to his shot, I think that it does need to improve mechanically. There's a bit of a dip to it. Can have a bit of a chicken wing, that kind of like
Yeah.
steady, that support arm flare. Grouping is a little bit wild, but having said all that, you already touched on it. 35% from three, like, could do a lot worse for a guy that needs to do a little bit work. And I'm sure based on what I've read and heard from you, Maxwell, that he's obviously going to be willing to do the work
Yeah,
to get
great
to where he needs to
attitude.
be. Another lefty, which is always kind of be something that I point out within this draft class. Good frame and motor, moves very well for his size. I believe he plays out of position at Duke, where I think that he's going to be naturally more of a four in the NBA, but due to the roster construction, he kind of had to play the three. And I thought that he did a very good job. And I think it's important for players, Maxwell, in terms of their development, to do some of the stuff that they probably wouldn't have had to been asked to do because it's just gonna round their games out a little bit more. Shows nice wiggle with his finishing, which I stood out to me more on the rewatch, I think, than what I kind of like took away from the season last year. Like going back and watching his film, it's like he's a little bit more shifty than I remember, which is
Mhm.
which was pretty fun to see. Seems like he's going to be another good rebounder again this year, especially on the offensive glass. Shows good footwork on the defensive side of the ball. I'm I'm with you, man. That I think that he's going to be a good front court defender. I don't know if he's going to be like all world or anything like that, but he has great instincts. But on the defensive side of the ball, one thing that kind of stood out to me is that if he's going to be kind of put onto some guards, I think that that's going to be like his struggle point. But I do like him against more power players like these, like big wings, big forwards, even some fives. I think that he'll hold up well against. Not every college player, as much as they would like to say they're a 1 through 5 defender, actually are. But there's nothing wrong with being a 3 through 5 defender, especially in the NBA. And I think that's where Mark's going to kind of carve out a nice little role for himself whenever he does decide to come out.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's spot on. Let's do Baba Miller next. So
Okay.
I'm gonna kind of go quick on Baba.
Yeah.
There are guys in this exercise that we're gonna get to that I came out of the exercise a lot higher on him, and I was like, "Ooh, I actually kind of like a lot of things here." Baba was
But
kind of the opposite for me,
yeah.
if I can be frank. So Baba had a really weird year last season. So he was 6'11". He has this weird NCAA suspension where he is out the first 20 games. So he's joining mid-season, and it was over like like if you're like, oh, suspension, is there like character issues? No, it was like the dumbest thing ever. It was like he attended a basketball camp, like was invited to play in a basketball camp, and they played for his flight to get there. And the NCAA was like, you can't tisk tisk, you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so he missed half the season because a single flight was paid for. Just nuts. But very weird season at Florida State. Averages 4.3 points and 3.7 rebounds in about 17 minutes per game. 6'11", 205. Good athlete for 6'11", gets up off 1 foot really well, like very effective as a finisher last season. 69% on twos. So has some touch and can do some stuff around the rim. The shot has to come along. He shoots it up the left side of his body with a very deep dip, and that shot is all over the place. There are misses left, right, short, long, you name it. He has missed a
Anywhere
shot
you can
that
miss a
way.
shot. Yeah.
25% from three on about 2 attempts per game. So he was taking them because, I mean, he only played 17 minutes a game. So the volume was solid. He was also 3 for 10 at the free throw line last season,
Mhm.
which is like such a small sample, but is still befuddling. Can put it on the floor a little bit, plays with some bend. He is exceptionally weak with the ball. And I know, again, this is a guy that's young. He's got the body to fill out. It felt like anytime someone made a play on the ball, like if you just like if he dribbles and you go in on his handle, or if he has the ball in a triple threat position, you put your hand on the ball, like he's going to turn it over. Like if
Yeah.
anybody makes contact with the ball, it's done. It's a turnover. Can't go up through contact at all. Can't play through anybody, digging, swiping. It's just done. He threw some really inaccurate passes too, where I was just like, oh, all right. Like there was like this whole kind of grew up as a guard narrative with him, and then some of the passes that he makes, it's like, where did you think that guy
Yeah.
was? Like, very, very strange. Defensively, it's a little odd. Like the tools are all there. It's not like fully realized, but on defense, if you just sort of like know what's happening, I'm very forgiving of you when you have the gifts that he has. So I think he's going to be fine defensively. I don't totally worry about that. I just worry about like, what does this guy do on offense? Because if you're going to be a play finisher, I'd like you to be more filled out, and feel like you're not going to just lose the ball if somebody touches it. I am starting to become lower on the upside as like a shooter and floor spacer and guy who can put it on the floor and create. I just think he's really far away still. So he's more of a guy that it's like maybe in a second round on one of those super cheap guarantees or something like that. I could do it, but I had him in the first, and I'm just having a real hard time after that rewatch, kind of squaring that away. But where are you at with Baba?
I think contextualizing it is a big thing, and Maxwell, you
Yeah.
talked about the suspension. What came along with the suspension is that like he couldn't do anything with the team. So
Hmm.
like there's the whole like getting familiar with his teammates. There's the whole strength and conditioning aspect of it that he had to miss out on, which you know, and talking to a guy who is going to be a player that I interviewed, who you're probably going to be able to listen to when this pod is out as well.
Yep.
A guy who has only been there for maybe a month has already put on 10 to 15 pounds. Whereas with a guy like Baba, that's just as important to his game. And based on what I know about the terms that kind of go along with the suspension, like any hopes of putting on any weight, any hopes of getting to know his teammates had to happen on the fly. Like you don't put on weight in the middle of a basketball season, right? Like
No, you
you
don't.
do that
Everyone
stuff in an
loses weight
off.
during the season. Yeah, if you talk to these guys, they're like they shed weight, like they put it on the off season, and it's just so up and down, and the weight flies off.
Yeah, you just kinda hope to do everything that you can to maintain it, so, I'm willing to kind of almost throw last season away in a lot of regards, but there were some things that did stand out to me. You talked on the playmaking, Phil. Maxwell, he had a 25% turnover percentage and only and less than a 9% assist percentage. That's scary considering what he was
Mhm.
kinda built for us to be. Now, again, I'm gonna put some of that to like he was still trying to gain familiarity with his teammates, but my goodness, like that was pretty scary. Um, the shot looks okay, but I think that there is a little bit of a snake bite motion to that, but the misses were wild, just like you said. I did like his ability to cut away, like as he didn't have the ball in his hands. I felt like he did move pretty decently without the ball, especially since he wasn't as strong as what I'm sure everyone would have liked to see him do. And then he uses his length to disrupt shots pretty well, had a 3.1 block percentage. And that's still him learning on the fly, like
Yeah.
going from not playing at all to in the middle of ACC basketball play, like learning on the fly, was still able to be a pretty good defender, right? I think obviously he'll need to improve that strength to truly become a 1 through 5 defender. And I kind of wonder, Maxwell, I'm going to ask you this question. With a player of his length and this kind of like natural ability to kind of like absorb a basketball when it comes off of someone's hands, do you think that has a tendency to kind of like pacify their footwork and technique, like learning how to be a more sound defender when there's like this natural ability to just reject shots as opposed to being more fundamentally based?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a good starting point in a way, right? That it's like you have a lot of stuff that you're just able to do that a lot of people might not be able to, and then like the stuff that needs to be worked on is teachable. And that was part of why I was really high on him coming to last season. Was it just felt like, oh, he's a little too upright on defense. Like someone can just tell him to not do that anymore. Like a lot of the stuff
Yeah.
is just like, oh, this is really coachable. And Florida State has had like a kind of up and down track record as far as NBA talent. Like there's, Scotty Barnes and there's Pat Williams and there's, Raekwon Gray. Like there's just some guys that don't
Devin Vassell,
get over
yeah.
that hump. And then some guys that, yeah, like Devin Vassell, who's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
uh, but I do think to Leonard Miller's credit is like, you can't point at his teams and be like, well, they don't play defense. So I would anticipate that the defense becomes a lot more well-rounded coming into this year. Like I think this year we'll see Baba like truly defend. And if he does that, then maybe I'm willing to gamble on him a little bit higher than the second, as long as the offense looks like it could maybe get there. I just think he's still like a real project. Is
I
my
do too.
guess.
I came away much less enthused, and I'm trying to rationalize it with how far behind he had to kind of, oh,
Hmm.
excuse me, how far behind
You're good.
he had to start as a prospect. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I do feel like I do have him too high on my board right now. But I don't know if I want to like overcorrect too
That's
hard
fair. Yeah.
whenever he can. like coaching and
Mhm.
getting familiar with your teammates is going to do a world of wonders for this guy. I truly feel.
For sure. So I've got some guys that I'm the opposite with. So we're gonna get back on the positive side of things here. So
Hey,
we're gonna take one quick break, and we will be right back. So we're going to go a little bit quicker on these last couple guys. These guys are a little bit lower on some boards, but still guys that are really interesting. Trey Alexander, someone we touched on earlier, 6'4", 185 out of Creighton, tested the draft waters, opted to return to college. Trey is somebody I like a lot. Did a big feature on him last year. Role change, I think this year is going to be big. He was kind of the two guard alongside Ryan Nemhard. This year,
yep,
Stephen Ashworth in the mix. From what I understand, it sounds like based on the Bahamas trip that it's going to be Trey at the point and Ashworth, even though he's kind of smaller, as the off guard shooter. Trey is so hard to read. Like nothing is ever off the table with him. Is kind of what I put in the notes. Like anytime he's operating pick and roll, you don't know if he's going to go forward. Is he going to go east west? Is he going to shoot? Is he going to find somebody getting open? Is it going to be the spot up guy, the roll man? Like he can really read and do everything in a pick and roll. And like even if he's not the most dynamic athlete, he's really hard to telegraph. And he actually pressured the rim and finished there pretty well compared to other guys in the class. And then like I think he had like one or two down games at the end of the season to kind of ate into that a little bit, but I think he's quite good there. Great in the mid range and can pull up from three. But the off ball value that we talked about earlier is what's obscene. He was almost 47% on catch and shoot threes last year. Defensively, 6'11 wingspan, plays really tough, like a guy who's not heavy, but plays like he's bulky, like throws his chest on guys so they don't get through him. I think he's one of those guys where he's stronger than his weight. He stays connected around screens really well. And he had a really high block rate for a guard. And it's like
yep.
things where it's like, well, I'm trying to square away. Like he's, not super bouncy and this and that. But at the same time, like he can really like just stick with guys and block them from behind or block them from the side. And I think he knows what he's doing on that side of the ball. I think if he's guarding other point guards in the NBA, maybe there's gonna be some nights where he's got some quickness issues, but I think if he kind of continues to fill out his frame, being that he is young for his class, like that's something he can still do, get a little bit stronger. I like him on that side of the ball. So we're looking at a good defensive playmaker. We're looking at a very creative offensive playmaker. I think Dirty Dancer, he has the question, I like Trey, but I'm a bit bored of him as a prospect. Don't know why he came back. I think it's to kind of show what he can do as a creator and a passer. In those games,
Yeah.
anytime that Ryan Nemhard missed games, he was averaging like 4 or 5 assists per game, as opposed to like the 2.4 or whatever he averaged last year. I think it's to really show like he's the full package as far as a guard, legit on ball creator for himself, others, and just a dynamite off ball threat and 3-point shooter. So Trey's like a late first guy for me. If this class like just isn't great, he could work his way up into the teens for me. I don't think that's unrealistic. But yeah, just a guy I really trust as a long-term NBA pro.
Yeah, I have him in the high 20s right now. I mean, we're talking about a guy who shot 45% from the floor, 41% from deep, 82% from the line. Just all around very good shooter. Improved as a playmaker and on-ball creator last year. I think a full season sample is obviously going to do him wonders. I love the poise that he plays with. Very much the type of player that I could imagine like the Denver Nuggets would go
Ooh.
after with one of their second round picks, right? Hearing everything that we know about the type of players that they are looking at. And I think too, the NBA being kind of a copycat lead in that regard, like are we kind of done with projects in the second round, or teams looking to try to value these second round picks even more? And with how top heavy some of these teams have become, are they looking to kind of fill out their rosters now with more ready to go kind of Jaime Jaquez type players for the Miami Heat, even though he was a kind of a late first?
Mhm.
I feel like the passing and defense and the defending answers the what else question that I typically would ask when it comes to a shooting prospect. Question I have for you, Maxwell.
Yeah.
Do you think at his height and the lack of truly elite on ball creation, and I would even add like elite athleticism, I think that
Yeah.
he's a perfectly fine athlete. Like
Mhm.
he's not bereft in that area, and he's a perfectly fine on ball creator and passer. But I wouldn't consider him elite in any
No.
of those areas. do you think that's what's making teams a bit skeptical with him?
Yeah.
Because I think that's really what it comes down to with him.
Yeah, I think the point that Dirty Dancer made is probably not an uncommon one in league
Yeah.
circles, where it's just like, oh yeah, he's like, 6'4" long. Like, I I think there was a little bit of confusion too, where like I don't want to like bury front offices or anything like that, but I think at the same time, um, front offices don't always get a little bit more creative with what guys can be, and I think with
Yeah.
Trey, I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, he's like a 2 or he's like a wing." And it's like, well, he's not. Like I think he is a point guard, and I think if you're not like and teams aren't going to go super deep in the weeds on guys that were kind of like projected in the range he was, where like, I think for most of the year, our group here at No Ceilings was very high on Trey. I think the general
Yep.
consensus was more that he was like a second or like even like an undrafted guy. Like, I think ESPN had him in like the 80s or 90s at times. Like
That's crazy.
I think because of that, like teams just weren't like really doing a bunch of hard work on him. Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think they just see a guy that's not super athletic, and when you're 6'4" and not super athletic or super quick or super bouncy, it can be really tough. I just think Trey is the kind of guy that can overcome that because the shooting is so good and because the defense is so good. So I don't sweat it, but I do think that is part of teams not seeing the value.
Okay, yeah, that's
Um,
fair. Yeah, we can move on now, man, to
but
Adem Bona, the
yes,
sophomore big man out of UCLA. What are your thoughts about Adem Bona, man?
I like Bono a lot. He's obviously a big time play finisher. He's 6'9", listed at I think he's only listed like 225 is what you had in the notes. And like some of those guys that plays like he's
Yeah, he might be
270.
bigger.
Yeah, and who knows too, because I think a lot of times you use like the basketball reference one, and sometimes teams' websites will be updated and they can be different. And then like
The
sometimes teams
season
haven't
hasn't
don't
kicked
have the
off.
new
Yeah,
weights in there. Yeah. So we're working with what we're working with. It's incomplete a lot of places. Bona's got like a 7'5" wingspan, I believe, was
that's
like the number that was
insane.
thrown out there prior to the year. So like 6'9", a center generally, you're like, do I like that? Is that okay? With Bona, I think he's got the dimensions for it. Crazy, crazy motor, just plays so hard, good hands, huge catch radius, super explosive. Another guy who sets real legit screens. Uh, Offensively, that's kind of what he is right now. I think the real question is just like, can he be more than that? Defensively, I don't know what else you could ask for. He's a legit rim protector, 9.1 block percentage, but also just effective at making guys miss at the rim. Opponents
Yep.
were 39.3% at the rim against him. And he can sit down and slide and stay in front of just about anybody. I thought his discipline when switched down got way better throughout the year. And I think whether you want him to show or drop or switch, like he's going to be able to do all of it. So I think even in a very simplified role, he can hang around the NBA for a really long time. I think the question is just how good does he look without Tiger Campbell? And I'm kind of optimistic there. I wrote about Dylan Andrews last week, and like Dylan Andrews and Adem Bona have some really nice lob chemistry, so I think he's going to be all right. Um, I think the question is just like, what else can he do on offense? Like, can he take on any bigger of a role? Can he be any sort of a passer? Can he make a mid-range jump shot? Like, is there anything else to it, or is it just this? Because if it's just this, then it gets a lot less exciting. Um, and then if he gets a bigger role, like what is he going to add? So that's kind of where I'm at with Bona. I like him. I like him kind of as like a late first, because I do think he's going to be around for a long time. That versatility is really important come playoff time, but he might just be kind of bland on offense. So where are you at with Bona?
Yeah, I think too with looking at his game, I even wrote in my notes, do you think that an Onyeka Okongwu scenario is in play for him next season? And I think that question is I think it's a decent question, but it's
Mhm.
like I wouldn't compare him to Onyeka Okongwu skill wise because Onyeka
No.
had like the playmaking feel to kind of go with his offensive game a little bit, but the defense I think is like the selling point. But maybe like comparing him to Okongwu's teammate Clint Capella might be the more apt comparison, right? Because he's a little bit limited in the playmaking front, little bit limited as a shooter at any level, really. But the defense is just so nuclear, and like you said, the catch radius is so ridiculous that he is a threat anywhere around the rim. He switches out very well, like you said. which is that increases the number of teams that he can play for. When you're kind of like a drop only big, there's only so many teams that are going to look to identify you as a valuable rotation big, if not maybe a starter. Whereas what we've seen with Bona is like, there's not very many defensive schemes as a big man that he wouldn't be able to thrive in. I love the toughness and the intensity that he plays with. I wrote in my notes that he plays with his hair on fire. Keeps the offensive player second guessing as to what is open and what is not. The hands are really good. I think the feet could stand to be improved on the offensive end. Negative assist to turnover ratio guy, which I think again speaks to the what else can he do? What other roles can he take in on the offensive end? Because we know that NBA teams do kind of like to run their offenses through their big men a little bit with the guards and the forwards that are going to be on these teams. And I also ask, does Demara kind of slow down any sort of offensive growth
Mm-hmm.
that Adembona could add to his game? I think that that's a valuable question to ask as well. But overall, I like him. Kind of similar to Trey Alexander. I feel like we kind of already know who this guy is, which is a silly thing to say when there's a whole season in front of us that
Yeah,
these guys can go out and prove us wrong, and they typically do. But I'm excited to watch them play this year, man.
for sure. So let's get to somebody who is actually just brought up in the chat, Trevon Brazil.
Yeah.
Um, at Arkansas, Brazil is the guy that I flipped on quite a bit. I had long been much lower on Brazil than a lot of people, and I think this rewatch just kind of made me be like, oh man, what was I thinking? So 6'9", 215, kind of long and lean, a little bit skinny, but not weak. Again, another one of those guys that like just has a real toughness to him that I think allows him to play bigger than that. Like you look at him and you're like, oh, kind of wiry, but it works for him. He is a legit athlete with got to be insane measurables. I don't know that the
Yeah.
wingspan is out there, but like he looks like Slender Man out there when he's extending his arms. So I think he's gonna have a plus kind of wingspan. He is going to thrive in a low maintenance role. He is a big time play finisher, and I think he has real versatility offensively as far as what he can do as a screener. So he's not
Mhm.
like a Bona or a Klingon where he's going to level a guy, but I think because he's a good catch and shoot guy, so he's now 35.5% on three through I call it like 1.25 college seasons, 1.33 college seasons. Only played 9 games last year due to injury, but solid shooting sample and can show that for his size he can shoot. He's really good in a straight line and can really
Yep.
get off the floor to finish above the rim. That when he sets a screen, he can pop and he's a threat to shoot. He can roll and catch a lob. He can slip. And if he does that, he's going to be a lot quicker than his man a lot of the times and be able to get downhill quickly. Or he could ghost. Like it wouldn't shock me if we see him be a guy that starts to ghost at the screen and now he's flaring out for a three, if that's something that he adds this year. Um, I think that defensively, there's a lot to be excited about because of what he's going to be able to offer with how long he is. He's not a real five by NBA standards, but I think that if he
Yeah.
does fill out his frame, he can be the rare four who can actually do the small ball five role successfully. Very easy off the floor, very quick, great anticipation around the rim for rotations, and like a true big time leaper. Like we talked about Santa Claus earlier, like Trevon Brazil in that same conversation.
Jumping
Gets up,
like Santa.
yeah, gets up easy time and time again. Makes a lot of plays and like not a big time foul guy either. Like not one of those guys where it's like,
Nope.
oh well, he almost had a highlight reel block, but he fouled or something like that. Like it just doesn't happen with him. Um, I think the switching stuff is a little theoretical, but not to the point where I'm like worried about it. Like I think it'll get there pretty quickly. There are times where he's really narrow when he switched down and like he bites on a lot of stuff and the recovery tools are really good. So maybe it's just like knowing that he can get away with it at this stage that like he will jump for everything. But that needs to be refined on the perimeter. He is agile enough that like if you try to screen him, it's kind of the opposite of what we talked about with Filipowski. He's really able to respond to that,
Yep.
get around players, anticipate it. Um, the thing that I have the hardest time with, and a big part of why I was lower on him, is I think his feel offensively is so far behind his feel on defense. His passing recognition is really bad. At this point, he will miss guys that are wide open, can kind of stop and survey on the perimeter at times. That is my big holdup. Is like if you're going to be a 4, even if you're just a play finishing 4, like I want to see decisions made a little bit more quickly, and I want you to see like very obvious easy reads that he has a tendency to miss. So I'm hoping for growth there and maybe being injured for a year. And like he's coming back and everyone says like athletically he looks tremendous. Then maybe just that year of like being around the team, having to watch, having to do film. Like maybe that's just what the doctor ordered and that stuff flips. But if we're just zooming out, I say this all the time, like NBA tools and good at the important stuff. We'll shoot, finish above the rim, defend a couple positions, weak side rim protection. Like that's all there. I think this is a guy that I'd been really low on, and coming out of this, I feel like he's like a pretty clear first round guy for me.
Yeah, I had him, I think, at 19, if I'm not
Mhm.
mistaken, on my board. And that was before watching him against Purdue. And he looked great, by the way. Like there
Yeah.
were a few possessions where forcing a turnover, going in just hitting threes, like not, I would say, easy threes, but they're not the most difficult either. It was just like a very NBA level three where it's, forces a turnover, flares out on the wing, catches, doesn't hesitate, just no doubt that the shot's going in. So very confident in this 3-point play. Love the momentum that he built for himself last year. For those who aren't familiar, I'm a Razorback fan. I do try to keep my bias and my fandom kind of tucked away as an evaluator. But I got up for this Purdue game, man, because Arkansas is a very deep team. There's a lot of very good
Yeah, there
guards
is.
on this on this Arkansas team,
Mhm.
and I think that's only going to help Brazil kind of fill out the kind of connective ability to his game. Because if you look, they got a freshman Layden Blocker who looked really, really good, very poised. A lot of transfers coming over in Caleb Battle and Tremont Mark, and then bringing in Davenport over. So there's a lot of really good basketball players surrounding him this year to where he's not kind of like big brother in the lineup. Whereas last season, there were a lot of, kind of freshmen coming in and trying to make plays. Now he's with, like, I would say, in terms of experience level, there's a lot of peers that he has on his team where he is going to kind of have to get in where he fits in. And I think that's going to help him in that regard. But he does seem to be the type of player that fits the modern game, Maxwell. Very
Yeah.
good weak side rim protector, very good lob threat finisher, and also the shooting as well. I think that his game is going to be complementary because the ball skills, Maxwell, that you were just speaking to, the passing, I even do think that the dribbling could stand to
Yeah.
improve a little bit too. So if you're going to be that finisher, you have to be really good at the things that he is already really good at. So that helps his draft stock there. The big question moving forward was the health and how the athleticism holds up. Dirty Dancer already had, brought that up in the comments because the athleticism seems to be maintained. Uh, that's a great sign, man. And maybe he even gets back to being even more athletic because I always say that these lower body injuries usually take about 2 years to recover from. So, looking at everything that he's good at, some of the areas that he can stand and improve on, I do love the spin that you just put on that, Maxwell. Like being away from the team and being an observer, maybe that helps his kind of connective ability. He did seem to be kind of playing well within himself against Purdue, which was like the third ranked team in the AP top 25. I did love everything that I saw from that game, and here's hoping for a continued development for him this year. Woo pig.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, up next we have
Hello,
Kalel
where?
Ware. So Kalel Ware is a polarizing one. I would say
Yeah.
I'm firmly in the Kalel Ware agnostic camp. 7 feet tall, 210. One of those guys where again, like you just look on paper and there's a lot to be excited about. Has the mobility to defend down. He gets up easily around the rim, can slide with smaller players, can recover in the instances he does have to turn and chase. Had a nice block rate last year. Offensively, the shot looks really pretty, and he's like ready to shoot it off the catch. Was around 30% or so, which is a solid mark for a young big man. Has nice skill moments on offense where he'll look off a pass, and it's like, oh man, like, and it's just not there all the time. Uh,
Mm.
and that's the really troubling part with Kalel Ware is like how much of that was Kalel Ware and how much of that was the bizarre circumstances at Oregon last year, where they had N'Faly Dante, who's like just a great college big man, like really reliable play finisher, very sharp defensive player, very tough, big, strong guy. And then they also had Nathan Biddle, who was like previously a top 10, 20 recruit, one of those guys that we don't hear about much because he's not an NBA guy, but is skilled and good at college basketball. So his minutes, his role was never the same. Like when that happens, it can be demoralizing. It can be hard to deal with. It can be hard to play through. It's hard to know what kind of energy to bring when you don't know if you're going to play 30 minutes, if you're going to play 9. Like, I don't know how much of it falls at his feet and how much of it is just confusion, but he brought very little on the offensive glass. He completely disappeared at times. He would throw lazy passes. He would let his man get behind him on the rolls like way too often. And he doesn't always get off the floor. And like when you don't do that, then your man gets behind you on a pick and roll. Like it's a lob for a dunk.
Yep.
He doesn't always box out. He jumps himself out of position. He struggles mightily against contact and helps and doubles. Like there's these real severe kind of flaws that like, okay, well, that can be common for a young big man, but maybe not have it be that big of a problem all the time. And I don't know what I'm doing with this guy. I've got him in the second right now because I'm just kind of like, hey, prove me wrong. But yeah, very, very inconsistent. But I mean, the flashes are exciting. They're just so few and far between. What are you doing with Kalel?
I need to see it, man.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Indiana, we've already talked about them when we broke down McKenzie's game the other day. Indiana doesn't have a proven track record to turn these dudes around. Kalel Ware already didn't fit in a very confusing, like you mentioned, Oregon situation where there was this like kind of center by committee. I questioned the commitment there whenever it happened, and unfortunately it was kind of proven right. And I don't like that. I would much rather the other thing happen where he explodes. He is the rival to Derek Lively that everyone kind of labeled that he would be last
Mm-hmm.
year. And look at where the two are now, So his game does appear to be modern because of the willingness to shoot from deep. But I don't love the way he moves on the floor, man. Like if we're going to look at him as a malleable big, as like this kind of like offensive game where he can stretch the floor, and then defensively where he can kind of protect and roam and reject everything. I'm not a fan of the way that he moves on the court, man. He seems like he's a bit too slow to do what
Yeah.
he's trying to do to get to the NBA. So, although I'm not a big fan of how Indiana has developed, I do think that teaching him to be a little bit more under the basket, teaching him to be a little bit more around the rim based and grow in strength and his ability to be a rim deterrent, not just be like this kind of roaming free safety on defense, but to be like the backbone that a defense is built around. Maybe Coach Woodson's able to do that, man, but I think effort is a skill. And right
It is.
now, that's a part of his game that needs to develop, man.
He really
Because
floats. Like, and it happens on offense too. Like, it's not just a
yeah,
defense thing. Like, there'll be times where I'll just like get the ball and just kind of shoot it. And it just doesn't feel like the motor is where it needs to be. And how many NBA bigs do you watch on a night to night basis where you worry about their motor?
I mean, I think the epitome of the motor concern would be DeAndre Ayton, who
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of got ran out of Phoenix, but
Mm-hmm.
Portland's willing to give him the keys. But he also put up crazy numbers, like for his motor to be cold and him still,
Yeah.
and for him to be able to put out the output
A
that
guy
he
who averages
has.
like 18 and 10. Yeah.
Correct. Joel Embiid once upon a time had his motor question when he was averaging like 22 and 12. Like for those guys' motors to not be running, they're still putting up ridiculous levels of output. Whereas Kalel Ware, you're not being able to beat out Nate Biddle, who was a highly regarded recruit in his
Mm-hmm.
class, and N'Faly Dante, who, like you said, is a really great college guy. But I mean, these aren't dudes that you're beating out for NBA jobs. Like you can't beat these dudes out for college basketball jobs. You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
that's kind of hard to sell me on, that just transferring away from that situation is automatically going to make you better. Now, Walker Kessler kind of did a similar
Yeah.
thing when he
Yeah.
was at North Carolina, went to Auburn. The rest is history. Maybe we can kind of see the same thing here for Khalil Ware, but there's a whole nother level of situations and circumstances and concerns that I have for Ware than I did for Kessler when he transferred.
Yeah. I'm just gonna end on this because I don't want to like keep jumping on a kid who again like I am totally open to be proven wrong. Like I said, I'm agnostic. I'm not a Kalel atheist. I'm not saying no. It's not gonna happen. It could happen.
Yeah.
It could 100% happen. And he's in an environment where like, he's gonna be the clear cut five. I think like him and Baco, Renew, like all those guys can play together, and that's gonna work and be fine. I think. With Ayton and Embiid is like, okay, well, they're bigs, but like they have their motors question. Like those guys just have things physically that Khalil Ware doesn't. Like
Yeah.
I don't think he's super bouncy. He's not super quick. He's not super fast, and he's really not strong at all. So with Ayton and Embiid, it's like, well, at least if you get them on an island, like they're gonna have something for you. Whether it's like Embiid being as ridiculously mobile as he is for a man his size, or with Ayton, it's just being like really strong. Like there are just things that they have that and Aiton doesn't use that on offense, and that's part of the problem is he's very content
Yeah.
to launch a 10-foot floater all the time. But like they just have a level of skill and physical gifts that I don't think Khalil Ware has. I think Khalil Ware is going to be pretty average athletically by NBA standards. And in that case, that means the skill and the attention to detail and the work rate on the floor just really has to click. So I'm open to it. I hope it does happen because I think he could be a really interesting player, but right now, he's the guy I'm going to kind of sag on to start the year.
Same.
Ryan Dunn is a
Mm.
really interesting one. So he's at Virginia, 6'8", 210, big, long, has that dog in him. Gets up really well, can really generate some putbacks, super explosive as a leaper. Will take off like from so far away on cuts or on drives, and it's like, uh-oh, that's a bad idea. And that's like, oh, no, finished it.
Yep.
I think that he can sort of do a little bit with the ball in his hands. So there was a
Okay.
game, I can't remember who it was, like whatever his best game was, it was against like a tiny Division One. So like grain of salt here.
Sure.
Um, but I thought that he saw the floor pretty well and like feels pretty comfortable dribbling. He can be a little bit wide as a driver, but I think he can at least swing the ball.
Okay.
Defensively, that's like the good stuff, right? Like he's tough, he's nasty. Had Jalen Slauson kind of real clamps on him for stretches during their game against Furman. Just a real deal NBA mover and NBA size player on that side of the floor. Takes up a ton of space off the ball with like his movement, his skill, and his speed. I think the biggest thing that stuck out, obviously, like his instincts around the rim are good. Like his timing for when to strip or jump a passing lane is really good. His balance is absurd. Like he
Yep.
will move at such high speed, and if he needs to change directions or shift gears or whatever, like it looks like in like those old. We're gonna age ourselves here, Steven. Back in like Madden 03, when you could play or
Ooh,
an NBA
okay.
Live, and you could play with unlimited turbo and just
Yep.
like go in any direction you wanted and stay at full speed the whole time. Like that's the kind of stuff that Ryan Dunn's able to do. Um, I worry that we are, and I say we, like anybody that's just kind of in the draft space, like a lot of places have him in the first round or early second. My concern is just like, are we basing this off of too little? This is a guy that played 12 minutes a game last year, scored under 3 points per game, 50% at the free throw line on low volume, took half a three per game and shot 31.3%. Shoots with a very wide base. Like, are we sure that this isn't just like a really good defender that might not have anything on offense? Like, that is my concern. I'm willing to be a bit more optimistic because, like I said, I think in the games where he did get to do some things, I think he showed like at least a baseline level of competency. But he's also like old for his class, and I'm just like, I don't know. Like, is this a guy where the offense is really just not going to be there?
Maxwell, we are basing it off of too little, but you know what? That's what
Mhm.
we do. It's
Yeah,
preseason. All these freshmen have not played. We're basing first
it's
round
true.
picks and number one overall picks on
Yeah.
players that haven't even taken an NCAA court yet. But so to answer your question, yes, we're basing it off of too little, but we all like what we see, man. Like
Hmm.
it's really hard to see what the NBA values, and then look at a player like Ryan Dunn and be like, nah, like to quote, Captain America, no, I don't think that I will. Like NBA teams just
Yeah.
aren't, they're not going to do that, man. Like, one thing that I'm just like a big fan of is looking on film and just be like, who looks like they belong on an NBA court
Yeah.
on the floor? And Ryan Dunn looks like an NBA
Mhm.
player on the court. I love the leaping, the sliding, the tenacity, very switchable on the defensive side of the ball. He does need to do more as a connector, but I think that he can, right? Like, this is a sophomore season. Yes, I get that he's a little bit old to be a sophomore or whatever, but like, to me, I value like not so much the age, but like the year of experience that you're in. So like second year of college basketball, like he can continue to improve in that regard. I do like the shot. I think that he's going to get the Trey Murphy the third comparison a lot because
Mhm.
he is going to be like really strong defender, really decent 3-point shooter. What else can you do type player? And Trey Murphy went crazy high. I have Ryan Dunn probably too low for where he's likely to get drafted if he everything, let's just say he hits his median outcome on what everybody is projecting, right? I have him like 30th on my board right now because we are basing it off of like a very small sample size. But I do want to say that like I think that he is a first round talent. I just think that based on where I have him, and if he just kind of does everything that I think he can, he's just going to be like one of these natural risers on the board because of his size, because of the tools that he has, because of the ready-made skill set that he has of being a really good defender, really good athlete, and a really good shooter. Like, I don't care that if like I'm evaluating everybody in this class, Maxwell, and I'm looking at him and Justin Edwards, and I'm like, well, I think that Justin Edwards can be a really good second or third option in the NBA, maybe even a first if everything hits right. But Ryan Dunn, you're probably going to be like the fifth or sixth man on a really good team.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna just say that because you're not Justin Edwards that I'm out on you, although you play the same position, your same build, because you do bring something incredibly valuable to the table. Like, you can't compare him to other archetypes in a draft class and just slide him down the board, right? So I think that that's going to be where people kind of differ on where he lands on their big boards a little bit. I'm just incredibly high on what he can bring to an NBA team already. And I do want to see that. I do want to see it ramp up. I do want to see the improved sample size. But based on all indications that we've heard already coming into the year and what we saw last season, the no ceilings title is kind of like apropos for a guy like Ryan Dunn, I feel.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. I'm excited to see what he looks like because it seems like he should have a pretty big role. I was also just like not a big Kihei Clark fan at
Yeah.
all. So I think things kind of flowing through Beekman will be at least a little bit more under control this season. So Virginia is going to be a really interesting team to watch. So that does it for Group One of the returners. We have more
Hmm.
returners next week, guys. We have first round grades on. Lots of good guys still coming down the pike. So stay tuned for that. But let's talk about what we've got in the works. So my stuff will already be out, so I'll get that out of the way quick. Got an interview with Spencer Jones
Nice.
and an article about Spencer Jones, who is at Stanford. He's going to be a graduate. A guy I chose to write about because this offseason I was doing kind of database work, and I realized that he graded out favorably compared to NBA forwards who got second contracts in terms of 3-point percentage, 3-point volume, steal rate, and block rate. So in a 3-and-D league, a guy that's 6'7", 225 pounds, and is really good at shooting threes on high volume and playing defense. Seemed like somebody that we should be talking about. So did a feature on him. And then also coming soon on No Ceilings Plus. We've got more stones unturned, so stay tuned for that. But Stephen, we're putting this out on Tuesday, so this is your day. What can people go see if they go to NoCeilingsNBA.com right now?
Well, if you go to NoCeilingsNBA.com, where you can still get around the week free
Mm-hmm.
content at NoCeilingsNBA.com. You should go check it out if you haven't already. Subscribe while you're there. You can see an article of a full prospect breakdown of UConn Husky freshman Jaden Ross. All right. To accompany that, there will also be on the podcast feed a about 25-minute interview that I got with said freshman Jaden Ross. So both of those things will be out today. You should go and check those things out. Love the kid. Maxwell, you would like him a lot. He's one of these, started his high school playing journey at 5'8" and has since grown to 6'7".
Love the growth
Um,
spurt guys. Yep.
the growth spurt guys with guard skills getting better is there. Obviously, there's a little bit of kind of adversity that he'll have to face. He's going to a really good team with
Yep.
a lot of, returning players and transferring players. But I honestly feel like, based on everything that I've heard from him, his camp, the university, and then just watching the film, like seeing the things that this kid is doing, like you can understand why the recruitment process was a little bit slow, and it was due to the growth spurt. And Maxwell, kind of, I'll dive a little bit into the article, something I touch on. Like, the impact of COVID is still lingering, right? Like, not just in terms
Hmm.
of like a health thing, but like the way that players were recruited, the level of visibility that they received during the pandemic. Uh, Jaden Ross is one of these guys where I feel like people are going to watch him and they're going to be like, "Holy smokes! Like, where did this kid just kind of come from out of nowhere?" Go and watch this film, man. Like, 6'7", sweet shot, good ball handling, improving as a defender. Like, and UConn is going to Coach Hurley is going to get every ounce of potential from this kid. I'm excited for him and his season. I'm excited for everyone to go check out the work.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too. And I think the code point Nick is a really good one. And like it was interesting because like when I talked to Spencer Jones, it was something different where he was just talking about like not really playing very much his freshman sophomore year because he went to like a really loaded high school. And with the recruiting
Mhm.
process, like so much of it happens early. Like recruiting services, colleges, they make up their minds about guys really early on in the process. So oftentimes it is like these late growth spurt guys or guys that don't click until later on that really tend to sneak up on people. So he's a guy I haven't done a ton of work on. And like, I knew that you had something kind of cooking with him. So I sort of put it off on purpose because I was like, I want to see, I want to hear this. I want to kind of get an idea as to what I'm getting into. I've looked at the other UConn freshmen except him solely just because I want to kind of get your take on it before I go into the film. So I'm really excited for that one. So go check it out, both the written content and the podcast, and everything will all be up. So that does it. So in the meantime, follow Stephen at Stephen G Hoops on Twitter. Follow No Sings at No Sings NBA. Follow me at Boundboards. And yeah, go to nosingsnba.com. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast feed, rate and review. It helps people find us. And if you're so inclined, No Ceilings Plus for extra bonus content, $8 a month. And the YouTube channel, No Ceilings TV on YouTube. So that does it. We appreciate you
Yeah.
guys tuning in to Draft Sickos, and we'll see you all next week.
Stay Maui strong, y'all.